Good afternoon. Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Using the Power of ERP for Supply Chain Optimization. My name is Danette Scheip, and I'll be your moderator for this webinar. Before we get started with our speakers, I'd like to go through a couple of housekeeping items. First, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You'll see a webinar pane that you can use to enter your questions. Just click the red button to send the question to our presenters. They will answer the questions as time allows at the end of the presentation. Secondly, we want to make sure that you have excellent audio quality, so please select the appropriate setting. If you're using a telephone, please click on the Use Telephone Audio Mode, or if you're listening through your computer, then please click on the Use Mic and Speakers option. To qualify for California CE, you must use a personal computer, no PDAs, and log in with your own information and unique URL. You must be logged in to our online software for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled time frame of the webinar. You must actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions and complete the evaluation survey at the end of the webinar. Now let's meet our presenters. Our first presenter is Bill Brown. He's the Director of Client Services at Mannix Consulting. He has over 32 years of extensive manufacturing experience in general management, operations, quality systems, engineering, product development, and continuous improvement initiatives, including lean manufacturing. He has led numerous initiatives resulting in top and bottom line growth across industries and geographies. Our next presenter is Teresa Brown. She's a Director of Consulting at Armanino. Teresa has over 15 years of experience implementing Microsoft Dynamics GP for clients including manufacturing, distribution, and wholesale companies. She's a Microsoft Dynamics GP Certified Master, a Microsoft Dynamics Certified Trainer, and sits on the Microsoft Product Partner Advisory Board. Our learning objectives for today's webinar. Participants will discuss trends in supply chain development and optimization, discover the various supply chain development tools, review direct and indirect cost savings and how you can apply these to your organization, determine how to integrate an ERP solution with shipping carriers, vendors, and customers, and review benefits of running an ERP solution from the cloud versus on-premise. For this webinar presentation, we will cover the following topics in this order: trends in supply chain development and optimization, supply chain development tools, and enterprise resource planning tools. Okay, before we move on to our presenters, we will start with our first polling question. It's a survey question. We'd like to get an idea of who is on our webinar. This will help our presenters tailor their talking points. So the question is, do you have a formal program to work with your supply chain to reduce costs and improve quality? Your selections are there. Please go ahead and vote. And a reminder, you must respond to at least 75 of our polling questions in order to be eligible for CE. And even if you're not interested in CE, we still do want to hear from you, so please vote. And it looks like our polling's coming in. We'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Polling is now closed, and I will hand it over to our first presenter, Bill, to review the results.
Thank you. Typically, we're finding 62% of the pollees say they do not have a formal supply chain program, and that is not unusual for the mid-sized companies in Northern California. Mid-sized companies are those that are between 10 to $100 million in size, typically, about maybe 150 employees, but it is not unusual for companies to not have a formal supply chain program. Okay, we're going to start talking about trends in supply chain development and optimization and why the supply chain is so important to your business. Mannix is what's called a Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We are part of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. which is an arm of the Department of Commerce. Our mission is to work with the small to mid-sized companies to develop their supply chain systems, and we try to deliver national programs and services to help the small to mid-sized companies that cannot get consulting services from the larger consulting firms. We are a third party. We come out to help you in your programs, and that's our job as a part of our federal mandate. So what is a supply chain? The programs we're talking about today really have a couple different programs. The Accelerate program is actually a formal program designed to work with a major customer and their supply chain. And the whole goal is to reduce cost, reduce lead times, and improve quality for the end user. There are 60 MEP centers throughout the U.S., and we all use the same approach when it comes to supply chain development. And that allows us to give outstanding results with over 360 projects using 24 OEMs like Rockwell Collins, some of the large defense contractors, and we've had projects in over 23 states. We've been able to reduce the most critical lead time, which is MCT, by about 45% on all projects. And what that allows you to do is take costs out of your program and then give your customer a product faster than you normally had in the past. So where is the supply chain and where do you fit? Well, you are in the center, and you have customers, and they might have customers, and then they might have an end customer. You also have a supplier that you buy from. They then probably have sub-tier suppliers all the way back to the raw material manufacturers. So everything in this chain from start to finish is your supply chain. And you have to focus on the whole thing, not just what the customer is saying, but you have to look at, can your suppliers give you what you want when you need it in the price you want to pay with the quality you need so that you can deliver the same thing to your customer.
Looks like we're at polling question number 2 here. All right, so this question reads, do you listen to the voice of the customer when designing your supply chain? You have your selections there, so please go ahead and make your selections. Again, we appreciate from hearing from all of you, even if you're not interested in CE. And if you have any questions, you can enter them in the question box and on your screen there. Give you a few more seconds. The polls are coming in. And we will close the polls here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Polling is now closed, and I will hand this back over to our presenter.
Thank you. Well, 72% of you said yes, you do listen to the voice of the customer, and that's outstanding because they're the ones that pay the bills. And if you're not listening to what they're saying and giving them what they want when they want it, they will find somebody else to do that job. So you really need to think about what the customer is saying, and then how do you impact that down to your suppliers? Because they have to be on the same page as you are, or you're not going to be successful. So when you think about the supply chain, what are global companies doing today? Well, they're looking at ramping up innovation. And innovation is different ways of doing something that is going to reduce your costs, improve your lead times, and improve your quality. And at the same time, you want to try to see efficiency improvements in your organization that's going to make you be more profitable. To be competitive, you have to look at the supply chain, and you want to try to use a team-based approach. This should not be just one person going out and talking to a supplier. It has to start with the design team, the procurement team, the manufacturing team, the quality team. You want to get your ERP group wrapped into this because when they send parts, you want to know what they're coming, when they arrive, how to control the costs. And you want to streamline this chain so you have as few suppliers as possible that gives you the biggest bang for the buck and allows you to manage this thing effectively. So manufacturing today is becoming very, very competitive among supply chains, especially as materials start coming back from offshore and we see onshoring and reshoring in the U.S. It's much more critical that we have things lined up with our supply chain. So some of the development tools that we can use for the supply chain are looking at it from a lean perspective. And lean is pretty simple. Lean says we want to get rid of waste. Lean is a bottom line improvement program. It looks at reducing the non-value added products, which are 60% typically of your costs, the non-value added but necessary, the things you have to do because you only have one machine or one tool, and you want to minimize those while you maximize value added. And some of the tools that we can use include value stream mapping, which looks at the process from the customer to the supplier all the way through your process. And then by using practical problem solving, continuous improvement tools, Kaizen events, those types of items, you're able to reduce your problems, improve your efficiencies, and then drop all these savings to your bottom line. This is what a typical value stream map looks like. It looks pretty complicated. On the upper right-hand corner is a little crown. That is your customer. He is the king, and that's why he wears the crown. The information flows are in the red lightning bolts, and then you see that goes to maybe that's your customer service in the peach. The group on the left is your most critical supply chain. Might be your longest lead time supplier or the one that's the most critical for your business. So material flow comes from the left into the right. You receive it into your stores, and then the blue is your manufacturing process. But all of this is time, and time is critical when you look at getting parts to your supplier. So how can you reduce that lead time, get rid of waste, get rid of bottlenecks, and then prioritize things that are going to make you the most successful? So typically in lean, there are 8 wastes. Defects is something you probably all see. You see big scrap bins in your operation. You might see startup scrap. You might see wrappers on the floor if you're a food company. Overproduction is making a big warehouse full of stuff that you might not be able to sell. Waiting for someone to do something. A huge amount of costs in waiting for someone to approve paperwork, waiting for parts to come in, decision making, those types of things. Non-value added processing and transportation are things that you do because your setup is incorrect. Your layout might not be right. Inventory is having too much raw material or too much work in process. Purchasing people tend to want to buy things as cheap as they can, but doesn't mean you're going to use them right away. So why would you want to buy something if you're not going to pay for it, or you do pay for it right away, but you can't use it for 6 months? And then motion is your employees. So if you have an area where you're having a lot of repetitive motion injuries with your workers, you need to look at why you're having those issues. How do we make sure we don't hurt the workforce? How do we have work centered around our workers? And then the biggest one that we see at Mannix is the employee. And that is not asking our employees how to do our jobs better, because they're the ones that do it every day. It's not the management team. And that's the focus that we have when we look at downtime for lean manufacturing. So you found a problem in the supply chain. You've got a supplier that is not giving you products when you need them, or you're getting quality defects that you're having to either rework, send them back. You might even have passed on a defect to a client. Those are types of things you want to start to focus on. So when you look at problem solving, the very first thing you have to do is define what the problem is and where is it. And this can take the longest part of this process. And it is so critical that you define the problem and not define a symptom, because then you'll chase and put the wrong corrective action in place. So there's really 7 steps. The first one is define, where you look at the initial problem and then you really define it. Measure, find out where it is. How big of a problem is it? Have you had a return from your best client and he's really upset with you? Where do you find the root cause? What tools do you use to analyze and understand where the root causes are? Because there might be more than one, and in most times there are more than one. And once you've analyzed and found the root cause, what do you do as a countermeasure to make sure that you're protecting your customer? Because the last thing you want to do is say, oh, by the way, we fixed your problem, and then in 60 days you send them the same problem again, because then you'll look sort of stupid. Then you want to evaluate your countermeasure. Did it work? And once it does work, you can then standardize the approach, which is the control part. So DMAIC is a 6 Sigma tool that we use to help customers solve problems, whether it be in the supply chain, internal, or even at the customer site, that you can use as well. It's a very simple process, but it's a very logical step-by-step approach to problem resolution. Some of the tools that you might be familiar with, in problem solving, we like to use Pareto charts, which are the issue A, issue B, issue C chart. It's a rank chart. So if you wanted to get the biggest impact for solving a problem, you would focus on item A. We also use the plan, do, check, and act cycle, which is the Deming cycle. So basically, without a plan, you have to create a plan, then you do it. Did it work? Yes or no. If not, you act on it and you refine it until you actually get the results you want. Some of the other tools you can use are the 5 whys, which is, why does this problem happen? You can use brainstorming, which is the grouping in the middle, and it's a paired affinity test. It's the same type of a problem-solving program you can use. And lastly, the item on the right is what's called an Ishikawa, or fishbone diagram, and that looks at 6 bones of the fish, which is man, method, machine, materials, equipment, and the environment. And by using a team-based approach, you can fairly quickly get down to where you need to be in problem solving.
So Bill, of these practical problem-solving tools, which do you find are the most utilized today in your experience? Which one of those, or which few of those are used the most frequently today?
Well, we always try to use metrics. So you want to use the Pareto chart first, because you really want to understand, is it a small issue or a big issue? If it's a small issue, you don't need a team approach. If it's a large problem, then you might want to get a team together. You bring in the tools depending on what problem you're trying to solve. 5 whys are very easy to do with a team, as is a fishbone. If it's a very tough problem, you might want to do a design of experiments, which I don't have up here. But there's a whole bunch of different steps you can use to solve those types of problems. I'll give you a good example. I work with a client, and we fixed his internal problems. Come to find out, his lead time hadn't dropped a day. So we sat down and went through the brainstorming again, found out his ERP system was broken. So we had to re-get the customer service team oriented into entering orders the same way every time into the system, and then fix the flaws in the system. So by interviewing the customer service people using the 5 whys, we found out why things weren't working. And that became how we fixed their ERP system.
Great.
So once you've done all your improvements, this is what a typical value stream map could look like after you've reduced waste out of the process. As you can see, the customer is still in the king spot up on the right. Supply chain hasn't changed, but the information flow has gotten much better, and we've also greatly reduced the amount of time to make the product through some improvements in the factory floor. And this is a very nice graphical way of looking at your total process or supply chain from start to finish. And once you put it on paper, it's then easier to diagnose than if you don't have something on paper. So again, getting that plan down is the very first thing we do, and that's why you have to do a value stream map or a process map.
About how long do you see these processes taking? So you had the funnel at the definitions slide, and boy, this is a lot less of an eye chart than the first one was, because there were quite a few more boxes there. But what do you think elapsed time could be? I mean, what's the shortest elapsed time for that process to the longest elapsed time that you've seen for a company to kind of get to a point to where they're getting, the huge benefits as we're seeing here on this slide?
To get this amount of benefits is probably 6 months.
Okay.
The value stream map itself only takes 3 to 4 days to do. A problem-solving activity can be anywhere from 4 days to 3 weeks, depending on how big a problem it is. But you don't see the results immediately until things start to smooth out.
Sure.
And once they've stabilized, and then that program is now standardized, then you can start to see how well we're doing. And that's why it's so important to have metrics.
Right.
Because you really need to be able to measure what you're doing before, during, and after to see, did I get where I wanted to go?
Sure. And this is valuable in small and larger organizations, I would imagine.
This can be used in any size company, whether it be a food producer, a large aerospace company, an automotive company, a metal vendor, IT. It's the same process for Oracle when they want to lay out a new program, or for even Facebook. How do we set up our strings? How do we set up our information flow? How do things come in and come out? It's the same process for any real event that you want to do.
Good to know. Software is being manufactured.
Absolutely. It sure is. So now that you've got your supply chain in a format that you like and you have your suppliers on board, you have to go back and say, are they doing what they said they're going to do? So you want to start doing supplier audits. And this needs to be a formal program, and in many good companies, it is a formal program where they actually go out and do and give them a report card, just like your kids bring home from school. So are they doing what they say they're going to do? Are they delivering on time? Is the quality where you want it to be? Are they an A supplier or a B supplier? You get down to a C supplier, maybe it's time to find a new one because they're causing you a lot of costs by having to come back and say, rework these, redo these, whatever it might be. You may want to create an audit checklist. How do you go out and find new suppliers? Because it's not always easy to get the ones that you want at the price you can afford. But if you have a checklist already predefined, it does allow you to click off and come back with a ranked order of which ones might meet your requirements. Then you always want to celebrate achievements too. If you've got a fantastic supplier that is an A supplier, you should be giving him an award. It could be a piece of paper. It could be a small plaque. They will put these up in their lobbies to say, I'm a qualified supplier for IBM. That's a big deal for them. So you really want to make sure that you recognize the ones that are doing a good job for you. You want to get rid of the ones that are not doing a good job for you, but you need to have a formal process to do this. Because ultimately, it affects the total cost of ownership. And you have to look at more than unit costs. If you're having to fly somebody to China every other week because you've got quality problems, there is a cost to doing that. And that TCO is so critical nowadays. That is why things are coming back on shore. Because the unit costs are getting smaller, and those extra costs are adding up.
Okay, looks like we're on to polling question number 3 here. And this question reads, what other tools do you use to improve your supply chain partnerships? You have a variety of options to select from there. Go ahead and make your selection. Just a reminder that we are recording this webinar, and a copy of the presentation and a recording will be available on our website. Everyone who's registered for this webinar will get an email with a link to the recording. And again, if you have any questions, please do submit them, and we will get to them as time permits at the end of the presentation. Give you a few more seconds here to make your selections. Their polls are trickling in, and we'll close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Polling is now closed, and I will hand this back over to our presenters.
It's a very interesting survey. 29% of you said you had consigned material. That is a fantastic thing for you to be doing. Basically what that is saying is your vendors are bringing in materials into your floor, and they don't charge you for them until you use them. So if you can get to that type of a process with your companies, your suppliers, fantastic. Vendor managed inventory came in about 14%, and that is where the vendor actually comes into your facility and looks at how much you've used and then restocks for you. So that's real big in the automotive industry. Toyota, GM, Ford, Chrysler, they all use vendor managed inventory and consigned materials. Only 7% said simultaneous engineering, which doesn't surprise me. That is where you get the design team together with the supplier as well as the end user, the customer, to say, how can we take cost out of this program and also meet the engineering requirements of the part. So a pretty good spread overall. Nice job. Okay, so in looking at a global supply chain, I mentioned reshoring or nearshoring is what's going on. This is something that we're seeing more and more of across the U.S. It is not going to hit California as big as it will the other states, just due to some of the issues that we have with manufacturing in California. The whole idea, though, is to locate the supply chain closer to the end market. And by doing that, you reduce lead times. You do not have to buy a 40-foot container of parts. You might be able to buy a pallet load at the same price. And by doing that and collaborating with your partners and supply chains, you can now get into strategic supplier selection. It allows you to look at that whole supply chain and say, you know, we might pay 5 cents a part more now, but because we don't have to buy such a large quantity, you've improved your cash flow. And you don't have the risk of defects. You don't have the risk of having a design change come out, and now you have a whole lot of product that you can't sell. And the tools, again, for this are the same. You use value stream mapping to understand that flow from the raw supplier material all the way through to your supplier. And then you use the same tools, problem solving, lean manufacturing, whatever it might be, to help streamline those areas, which then reduces your costs, ensures that certainty of supply, and it improves the demand and helps you plan better than if you have 6 to 8 months of lag time on your components. So some key takeaways. Again, think of your suppliers as partners. They can make or break your business. And the days of the evil empire being your supply chain and they're trying to get an extra nickel out of you really are gone. You want to use a team approach for improvements. This should not just be one lone person in quality who is calling up a supplier to say the parts don't meet requirements. You want to measure what you're doing, let them know how well they're doing, help them become better, use the lean tools for improvements, and then celebrate the success with them, because you want them there for a long time. You don't want them to say, you're difficult to work with, I'm going to drop you, because they'll do that too. If you're a pain in the neck to them, they're going to find somebody else to sell to. So this has to be a partnership, or else things do not work. And again, you want to use good data. You want to make sure that you're integrated as much as you can. Perhaps their ERP can talk to your ERP. Wouldn't that be nice? Then there's a seamless transition from product to product line. But those are the things you want to take away if you're looking to improve your supply chain. And talk about supply chain. I was with a client today, actually this week, and looking at how we can improve their operations, and come to find out that they're not even using an ERP system in their factory. And they had no visibility to part shortages. They had no visibility to damaged components. And I think that's such a key thing nowadays, that you have to know what's going on in your factory, in your business.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a bit about what you see there?
So, you know, these are some of the things that we're hearing every day, and you hit the nail on the head, you know, visibility into what your customers are saying about your delivery, visibility into the speed and accuracy of your vendor shipments to you. You know, these are the kind of buzzwords that I hear on a daily basis, in addition to the ones you're seeing here on the screen. You know, people want to streamline their processes. They want faster, better decision making. They want to make the right decision at the right time, because they don't want to be the one that the customer calls and says, you're just not cutting it for me today. And so as it relates to supply chain forecasting optimization, we really need to look at what the current tools are today when we look at an ERP system. And it's scary to hear that there's a customer out there that maybe is functioning without one. I mean, I think you can do that for a little while, but not for very long. So as we look at just kind of the ecosystem, and this is a bit of a different experience that you would see, you know, 20 years ago. The little orange box in the middle is the ERP or the CRM system that we're talking about today. And you see some little arrows there going to vendors or suppliers, going to employees, to customers, and to management. And in order to make those connections and make them well, in other words, if you want your ERP system talking to your supplier's ERP system, it needs to cover all of the areas that you see here surrounded by that cloud. And we have new tools in the workplace that we can use to do that. And so you need to kind of start by doing what Bill recommended, is doing those value stream mappings and seeing where it is that you can take advantage of an ERP system, because frankly, the output of your exercise may or may not result in needing an ERP system. It might result in needing new management. It may result in needing new warehouse setups. It may, you know, but an ERP system is potentially one of the things. Now, if you look at the boxes there, you'll see some things that weren't there 20 years ago. You'll see a business intelligence layer that was previously a very expensive thing to have. A business intelligence was previously, creating expensive and vast data warehouses to pull that information out of the system. And now for management, we do have business intelligence tools that you can use that kind of lay right on top of not just your ERP, but your supplier system and your customer system to present really valuable metrics to key management, those key performance indicators that will help them make a really good decision in a proactive way. In the little green box around that, we talk about portal. People don't want to just be able to get into their clunky mainframe system anymore. They don't always drive to an office. If you are global, you're going to want to go in through the web or through some other application, such as the big purple box, which shows mobility. I mean, I don't know of anybody here at my company, how about you, Bill, that does not have an iPhone, an iPad, some sort of a mobile device, and really now I couldn't function today if I couldn't, approve expense reports from the road. And that's very easy to do with a mobile device. So, telltale signs that you are ready is what we've titled this. It's basically, when do you know that you do need a new ERP system? Because again, not everybody needs one, but let's talk about some of the key considerations here for considering a new ERP system. So here's one area that might be of interest. Your server or your other hardware is getting old. It's getting long in the tooth. It needs replaced. It's breaking all the time. Your IT people complain about the fact that it's, hard to maintain. So, your server and your other hardware may need replaced. It may be something as simple as barcode scanners. Those things might need replaced. And so you want to look at the whole picture and see when the time is right. Another consideration might be an upgrade. So Y2K was a big time for people to get new ERP systems, and that's about 13 years ago. And we find that anywhere between 10 and 15 years is when people sunset their ERP system and go for a new one. In between that time period, they may upgrade about every 2 to 4 years into the most current version of the software they're on. But as you're getting ready for another upgrade of your clunky ERP system that you've had for 13 years, are you going to upgrade or are you going to look to replace? So that's another consideration. Enhancements to customizations. Some people have spent thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars customizing their current ERP system to do specific things to make their warehouse more efficient, or their suppliers communicate with them. And as the suppliers evolve, as the trucking companies evolve, those customizations may either no longer be necessary because you can find those same sort of customizations out of the box in new ERP systems. So does it pay to enhance them continually throughout the life of your company? The fourth one there is maintenance fee payments. When you buy an ERP system, you're going to typically pay, at least in an on-premise, and we're going to talk about this in a few slides, you're going to pay a hefty sum to purchase the software, and then you're going to pay ongoing license fees to the software provider to maintain that software. What that gives you is access to bug fixes, new versions of the software, etc. And as you start analyzing the cost of continuing those maintenance fee payments versus maybe looking at purchasing a new system, that's another consideration. IT department intervention. Either your IT department says, we're going to move to a more relevant platform, or I'm out of here, right? So they can drive these conversations. I don't recommend that they be the sole drivers. I recommend it be a firm or a company approach. I think Bill mentioned teams are really important when it relates to an ERP system. What we don't want to have is we don't want to have the IT department calling and saying we need a new ERP system, or just the controller calling. You just don't get good benefit from one person driving that. And then finally, if you're doing outsourced IT, those fees may increase over time as well. What about this? Are your business processes evolving? Well, whose aren't? I mean, this is really one of the key considerations for a new system. Do you want to, but are you unable to at this point, interface the following sorts of things with your ERP system or even with your vendors or customers' ERP system? Banking and credit card integrations, huge push right now. The banking industry is changing. I get a call about once a week for customers looking to integrate with their bank for their bank to pay their bills via credit card. So this is something brand new. Your current ERP system probably isn't going to be able to handle something like that. Third-party logistics providers, do you need to interface with them? Do you need to give customers visibility into your pending orders that are on their way to them? You know, what's my order status? As opposed to having them call into a phone line and say, hey, where's my order? So portals can be available for those customers to log in and have visibility into where their shipment is, what they ordered last time, what's their receivables balance. Sometimes you can even get those portals now where you can pay your bill online directly and it comes right out of your bank account as a customer. Similarly with vendors. You mentioned vendors and the vendor whose lead time didn't change at all even though they had changed their processes. Well, wouldn't it be cool if you rolled out to the vendor the ability to update the ship date? So that could be very beneficial to a company to make it, you know, to make the dependency on the vendor to update that information. Sales tax software or sales tax vendors who will help you by automatically calculating the sales tax on an order-by-order basis. MRP software, shipping companies, exchange rates. I could go on and on here. There's probably about 25 more bullets that I could have included, but the last two, do you need approval workflow? And that's a really key consideration today. And again, you've got to extend that out to not just web availability, but to mobile devices such as the expenses and time.
How does EDI fall into?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. EDI is a very commonly requested interface between vendors and customers and your company. And so EDI is an electronic data interface that allows the customer to be invoiced through an electronic format or the vendors to, let's say, bill you through an electronic format. And in that case, there is a specific platform that you need to comply with in order to send those files back and forth. Companies like Target, Walmart, the larger vendors in the industry are going to require that you do business with them in that way.
Most of our companies are small to mid-sized companies, and they're not going to be going after SAP.
Sure.
They're going to want a mid-sized program or platform. Can the mid-sized platforms today get the same benefits as the large ones, but at a smaller
Oh, absolutely.
interface?
Absolutely. So I can't say that EDI is the cheapest thing to implement because it's not. I mean, there is some cost involved, but I will tell you that there are tons of third-party companies and developers who have written software that are plug-and-play interfaces to the most common ERP systems today. And so then it's just some simple configuration, a little testing, and you're up and running. And so you absolutely can do that without having an SAP or Oracle as your ERP system. That's a great question. Our last area that I wanted to address is other reasons you might be looking for a new ERP system. You know, you've got a new C-suite employee, a CEO, a COO, a CTO. These people can drive a new ERP system. It's interesting, oftentimes I'll get a call from somebody who is looking at software and then, you know, the whole process halts because they switch CTOs or CIOs or CFOs. It's really important to let those people be involved in the process. They have a lot of knowledge. They've probably been through it before. It's a great way to work with those folks. Have you acquired a new company? Are you going global? These are really obvious reasons to get a new system. Do you have new office locations, warehouses, offices, you know, sales locations? Are you deploying now to a remote workforce where you previously didn't? Are you adding a new line of of products. So those are additional reasons. So, you know, everything comes down to money when you start talking about software, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that really means, but you need to have some possible economic benefits, and the return on investment really can be calculated so many different ways. But I do want to point out in this little diagram here off on the right-hand side, three areas that are really important. To get value from a new system, you need to have one of three things. You need to have some great business visibility, revenue gains, cost savings. I mean, those are kind of the three key buckets that you can kind of put things into to determine whether or not that's a valuable thing for you to do. And in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about those. So if you look at the far left-hand column here, we've got the business visibility, the revenue gains, and the cost savings. And if you go to the far right, I'm just going to point out a couple of these, but this is a great slide to illustrate how you can take those down to a detailed level. So let's suppose the order to pick or packing process can be reduced. You know, that time frame can be reduced very significantly. You're going to result in significant revenue gains because you're going to ship on time. Your customer's going to order again. You mentioned EDI. That was a great lead into this. Workflows, EDI, user friendliness. You know, all of these things are going to result in some revenue gains. So you want to make sure that as you go right to left, the scenario meets one of the key objectives that funnels up into one of those basic principal benefits.
Well, I would think that with Amazon's new Amazon Fresh, I don't know if you heard about that.
I have not. Tell me more. If
you put an order into Amazon in the morning, they will deliver in the afternoon to your house. Produce.
Wow.
Foods.
Wow.
They've got to have an amazing ERP system to be able to handle all that transaction.
Absolutely.
Stuff, as well as the picking and the transfers. And so it's, I mean, if Amazon can take the benefits of it, anybody can really see the benefits of a good ERP system in a company.
Yeah. Would you say they're lean?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. There's always room for improvement, though.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that takes us to our fourth polling question here. The question is, the best fit for any organization depends primarily on cost for a new ERP system. It's true or false, or not sure. Let's give you some time to answer that. Just to remind everyone that we are recording this webinar, and you can access the recording and the presentation slides on our website. And again, we'd like to encourage you to ask questions if you have any. If we can get to them at the end of the presentation, we will. Otherwise, our participants will get back to you directly. So we'll give you a few more seconds, and we'll close the polls in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And polling is now closed. I'll hand that back over to our presenters.
Thanks. So I'm thrilled to see that false came up as the 58% of the vote, because that really isn't necessarily true. Although cost is a big part of the equation, it's certainly not the key, the only consideration when we're looking for a new system. So let's take a look at a little bit more information about the cost. And so, of course, the correct answer would be false. As it relates to cost, here's a big question burning in people's minds. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time going over the differences between the on-premise, which is the traditional application, installed on a server, versus the cloud and hosted solutions. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information. We're going to go in a little bit more detail in the next few slides about the differences between these. So the differences at a glance here. First, we're going to focus on cost. And you can see here in the columns we have on-premise, cloud, and hosted solutions in the various columns. But as it relates to cost, when you're putting the software into an on-premise or installed in your office's scenario, it's primarily a capital expenditure. It can be more than that as well. If you are purchasing software in the cloud, it's typically mostly an operational expenditure. And in a hosted environment, it's sometimes a combination of both. And I'm being a little bit fuzzy here because honestly, when you're putting in a new ERP system, probably in all cases, you have a combination of capital expenditure plus operational expenditures both. As it relates to maintenance costs and maintenance itself, in the on-premise solution, you are going to need an in-house IT person, and in the cloud or a hosted solution, it does require minimal, and I say minimal because it's not none, but minimal IT resources. You do need to have somebody who knows a little bit about, setting up a new user, et cetera. They're not going to be your full IT infrastructure, but certainly in the cloud or the hosted solution, you've got minimal there. As it relates to the software itself, there are differences in the licensing here. In an on-premise, you're purchasing the license. In the cloud, it's really delivered as a service. In the hosted solution, you can either purchase the license, and that's typically what you would do, or you could deliver that as a service as well. So that's a little bit misleading there. Delivered as a service is for sure the cloud solution. And then as it relates to hardware, in the case of an on-premise application, you do have to keep track of, the on-premise servers, the network, the storage, the hardware. You've got a lot of things to consider there, whereas in the cloud and hosted solutions, that's all managed as a service for you.
So if I wanted to come up with a program for a new ERP, how do I get started? Do I have to do a skeleton approach of the users and say, what do you want the system to do? Yeah,
that's a good question. So typically, a company will come up with an RFP or requirements document that states we need our system to be able to have, sales order processing and inventory control and receivables. Oh, and by the way, we have collection issues, so we need collections management. So it typically starts as what kind of modules am I going to need? At some point, you're going to look down at the user level to figure out who needs which applications to come up with the pricing, but you'll typically work with a reseller to help you come up with what it is that you need. Some companies will employ an outsourced service to come in and help them develop the RFP so they make sure they don't miss anything. And from there, they would reach out to vendors to help them find the right solution.
Thank you.
Great question. More differences at a glance. We've got availability, functionality, integrations, and user adoption. Huge, huge considerations here as it relates to your determining whether to go on-premise or in the cloud. So the first is the availability. In the on-premise solution, you walk in the office, you turn on your computer, hopefully the network's up, and you're in your system. It always depends on your network's uptime, because it's typically installed on a server in your office. Whereas in the cloud or a hosted solution, this is tricky, people who consider putting their software in the cloud, they have to realize that the cloud means the internet, which means if your internet is down, guess what? Are you in your ERP system today? Probably not. So you've got to, think about, am I in a location that has spotty internet? If so, maybe I need to upgrade the internet availability that I have, maybe add some bandwidth. If I want to deploy a cloud solution. The hosted could be, it could be a VPN connection or a virtual private network connection into my server or the hosted server, or it could be internet-based. It could be either. Functionality, integrations, user adoption, these are huge. You need to really consider whether the ERP system you're selecting has the functionality that you need. Does it have, if collections management is a big portion of, your considerations, you need to make sure the software you pick has collections management. If you are an international organization, you need to make sure that it handles multi-currency and intercompany if you've got multiple companies, so you've got to look at that. A big consideration as it relates to on-premise versus cloud or hosted is, do you have integrations? As it relates to communicating with vendors or suppliers and customers, do you have EDI integrations already written today? Are you going to need to rewrite those? Every time your customer or vendor makes a change, Is it easy to change in the cloud, or is it easier to change on-premise? You really have to look at those considerations if you've got integrations to other systems. And I would say my client base has at least 90% of our clients have integration to at least one other system. So it's not a small thing to think about. As it relates to user adoption, another big thing, you know, you're going to put the software in, are my users going to want to use it, right? They are used to coming in and doing things a certain way. So you want something that's really easy to use. You want something that they're going to appreciate using and that they're going to adopt. So look at the application, look at the screens, look at the user interface. How hard is it for them to log in, log out, print a report, save a file, download things to Excel? You know, things that they're used to using, you need to make sure that's in the system and that they're happy with it. So I would, you mentioned earlier today, you know, including the actual users in the process. Totally hands down. Pick a couple of key users in the organization. Let them be a part of the decision process for a couple of different reasons. One, boy, does that make them feel good. You know, they really feel like a part of the company. Number two, they really are the ones touching it every day. Why not, you know, listen to them?
Great. And now we are on to our last polling question here. And this question reads, which option results in a combination of both capital and operating expenditure? It's multiple choice. You have your selections there. Again, if you are interested in CE, you do have to respond to at least 75% of our polling questions, and this is the last one. So if you haven't responded, now is your chance. Give you some time to make your selection there. And the polls are coming in. Give you a few more seconds. We'll close the polls here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Polling is now closed, and I will hand it back over to our presenter.
So this is a pretty tricky question because the slides didn't 100% match what I was saying, and the answer is you all got it right. It is all of the above. So if you picked hosted cloud or all of the above, you absolutely are correct. There is a combination both of all of them. They can be capital or operating expenditures, either or.
Okay, great. And now we'll wrap it up here. So during this webinar, we've covered the trends in supply chain optimization, various tools that you can utilize to optimize your supply chain, telltale signs that you are ready for a new ERP system, and we did a comparison of the differences between cloud-hosted and on-premise tools. And now we have some time for some questions. While I'm reading these questions, if anyone else has any questions they want to ask, you can submit them now. And we have a few questions people are asking here. I will read one of them here. What are the cost differences between software that I use in the cloud versus on-premise, and why would I want to pay monthly fees ongoing if I can just buy the software?
Oh, that's a great question. So there is a cost-benefit analysis that you can do with your software provider. If they offer both cloud and on-premise solutions, you should ask them for some assistance there. In my experience, and I'm going to say my experience is not every software application, so I'm going to preface it with that, there are typically, when you are paying those monthly fees for hosted software, you know, that's certainly a very easy thing to budget because you know exactly every month how much it's going to cost. And in most cases, when you're paying for software in the cloud, it includes what I spoke of earlier, which is that yearly enhancement fee. So you're just paying the monthly fees. There's no additional things on top of that unless maybe you add a couple of users or companies or whatever it might happen to be, depending on the solution you choose. If you are buying it on-premise, you're going to pay up front, then you're going to pay those annual fees, which are typically a percentage of the cost of the original software purchase. So in the analysis that I have done, you will pay over a 2 to 3 year period about the same amount that you would pay to purchase it outright. So I think you really need to look at your goals for the company going forward to determine whether or not you do cloud or on-premise. And again, cost was not the only solution or the only consideration. All those things I said are really things you should look at.
Okay.
So the next question is, what is the typical transition approach to move from one system to the next? Currently in Access, moving to an ERP. That's a great question, and I'm going to say that I have seen ERP implementations take a typical, typical, I call it, implementation time frame is about 12 weeks. I've seen them go a little faster, and I've seen them last up to a year. It really depends on the size of the organization, the makeup, the users, the modules. So I'm gonna just say 12 weeks and let you listen to let you dig a little deeper. If you'd like to email me, I'd love to talk to you.
Okay, and let's see, there's another question here. How do you get started in supply chain optimization?
Well, it has to start with the end user being the customer, understanding really what their needs are, so that when you design your process, you meet those needs, and then you back that into your supply chain. So there has to be the synergistic approach from start to finish. And a lot of companies, all they do is they get the supplier requirements or the customer requirements. They order based on what they think they need. They don't talk to the supply chain and say, well, you know, if you only did this, we could knock out 20% of the cost for you. So that's what an integrated supply chain will do. It will actually help you reduce your costs and maybe even give you a better product to your customer than he originally asked for, but you have to get all parties talking to the same approach.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions here. What kinds of things can my company benefit from by adding a business intelligence tool?
Oh, that's actually, a business intelligence tool can be useful for all different sorts of folks in the organization. I'll just pick on two. Salesforce, or the vice president of sales, can have complete visibility into, let's say, a map of the United States or even the world to see at any point in time where the sales are happening. Business intelligence tools allow you to click on those, drill down into the details, see what customers are buying, see what customers are not buying, which is even more important, so you know what you're not selling. And it can help you incentivize your sales workforce. And then as far as CFOs go, you know, CFO doesn't have time to sit around and look at a pile of reports that comes up on their desk or even their screen, really. So, you know, a really nice dashboard that shows some key performance indicators about the health of the business. What's my cash look like? How are my receivables? What kind of inventory do I have on hand, and what are my turns there? Some really key metrics there would help somebody to be able to spot problems before they become problems, because let's face it, you can't wait until the 15th of the next month anymore to figure out if you made budget last month.
So true. Can a mid-sized company take advantage of the business intelligence in a mid-sized or mid-priced ERP
absolutely.
system? Is that a module that's there?
Absolutely. So there are business intelligence tools, and if anybody's interested in hearing more about the specific tools, you can certainly email me after the webinar. But there are business intelligence tools that are built with much different technology than there was before. They don't require big, massive data warehouses, which was the costly part of a BI tool. Using newer technology, we are able to, within seconds instead of minutes, be able to look at a very large amount of data in a very short amount of time.
And let's do one more question here about how often do companies change their software and how often do they upgrade their current software?
Yeah, so I'm saying the typical company changes ERP systems every 10 to 15 years. Some companies stay on it, 15 to 20 years. Some companies change after 8. It depends on the life cycle of the company, frankly. If you're going from startup to mid-size to large company in a 10 or 12-year period, you might change it 3 times. As far as upgrades go, I would say most software providers will release a new version of their software, a full version, about every 18 months. And so not every company that has the software will choose to upgrade every time. There's got to be a reason. They may do one every other time, so 4 years, maybe 3 to 4 years.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to our presenters. On your screen now is a contact information for both of them. If we didn't get to your questions, we'll have our presenters contact you directly, or you can contact them. As a reminder, our C certificate will be emailed within 3 business days, and you'll also receive an email with a link to this webinar and a recording of the slides. So thank you everyone for your participation today, and we look forward to your participation in future webinars. Have a great day.